Hey, how's everyone doing? Got some good news in the old email this morning. New music from the Tragic Hip is coming tomorrow to stream. It's music that they didn't put on Road Apples. So the name of the album is going to be Saskadelphia. And I'm going to read you the story. Here's the story of how it came to be, written by Lindsay Pereira. The story of Saskadelphia. It is 1980 in New Orleans, and in an old mansion that looms over the neighborhood called Vieux Carré, or the French Quarter. It is a place of ghosts, mostly friendly, that suddenly find themselves sharing a space with a Canadian rock band trying to exorcise demons of its own. The Kingsway studio at the heart of this mansion, where the recording sessions are being held, comes with ceilings that were 14 feet high and the troubled spirit of an alcoholic woman who died in the 1800s. It is said that she fell and hit her head but continues to party on the premises. If the young men from Kingston, Ontario, making music in what was once her home, singer Gord Downey, guitarist Rob Baker, and Paul Langlois, bassist Gord St. Clair, and drummer Johnny Fay, are troubled by this, they betray nothing. Guided by producer Don Smith and engineer Bruce Barris, the sessions yield an avalanche of gritty rock and roll with a relentless quality to it, like a stream of blues that struggles to be contained. The musicians are all in their 20s, flush with the success of a debut album that has gone platinum and earned them a Juno Award for Most Promising Group of the Year. They have the jinx of a second album to disprove, and now the resources to accomplish this. We were excited, says Rob Baker. It seemed like an incredible follow up to Memphis in the first record. We felt as if our career was taking off and we were flying on all cylinders, creatively. We went in guns ablaze. It was also an interesting time in music because a lot of diverse things were happening. We had written a lot of songs and done a lot of touring over the preceding 5 years. We were busy back then. Go up here. Um, Okay, as the songs come, they're tinkered with and evaluated for their worth. Their position sometimes ceded to other tracks that slowly bring an album called Road Apples to life. With no shortage of material, a trickier problem emerges. What do they leave behind on the studio floor? Then there was the question of a title. Johnny Fay comes up with a suggestion that he believes best defines the band's place at the time. I remember seeing this church of the Christadelphians and thought about how part of it could be crafted onto another word, he recalls. We were touring a lot, going from New York and Boston to Philadelphia and Saskatoon. It seemed like the clubs were all the same size and you could be anywhere. So we crafted one part of a Canadian city onto an American one. What rose to the top of the ballot for a bunch of possible titles was Saskadelphia. Baker remembers how the American record label reacted. They thought it sounded too Canadian, he laughs. So we suggested Road Apples instead, which they loved because they didn't understand the reference. We couldn't get more Canadian than that and got laughs about it for years. And so on. And so one album heads out into the world. A rung on the Tragic Hips climb into legend, while the tracks that don't quite make it are tucked into boxes and moved out of sight. They stay away from 3 decades until June 2019, when an article in the New York Times incorrectly listed the band among those who had lost tapes in 2008 fire in a backlot of Universal Studios that triggered the memories of their existence. Let me readjust here because I'm all hunched over like Hunchback. Alright, no, my thumb's in the way. This is great, eh? I'm like top quality producer here. Where are we here? Okay, we thought we must have lost something too, says Faye. So we began asking questions and eventually found our boxes of 2-inch tapes with no labels. It became like a forensic process, looking for the handwriting of engineers we had worked with, like Bruce Barris or Mark Vreeken. As it turned out, all of the Tragic Hips material had been relocated to Canada in 2001, and so in the summer 2020, these abandoned souvenirs from the press were opened, revealing tapes. We knew we had a lot to look at because we recorded a lot back then. We didn't know what was there, he adds, so this meant baking them and listening to them as they were being transferred, hearing them for the first time in 30 years. It was crazy. It must have been interesting to consider why these songs, all perfectly formed, didn't make this cut. It isn't always a unanimous decision, Baker explains. We thought about these songs because they came up during a time of vinyl records and albums. You would put on side 1, and if that was good, move to side 2. You wouldn't listen to one song and skip ahead. Gord Sinclair was a master of sequencing, and I started to get a bit of complex because the songs I loved would be left off. I remember loving Ouch, for example, which just faded away into the mist. I didn't think about it again for 30 years. So it's awesome to hear it now. They have a little life, I guess. Sinclair says they waited their whole lives to make their first record, as most bands do. We had so many opportunities to play together, like during sound checks, and we'd pull out new ideas in the middle of a song like Highway Girl to jam things out. Gord was moving leaps and bounds ahead of the rest of us as a lyricist. He was a prolific writer, so we had a lot of tunes. Our producer was all about recording. The band was playing at the same time instead of building up tracks. I was set up in one room, the guitar amps in another, and Gord singing in a third. We just kept playing until we got one solid take for each song. It was just a creative time. We were worried about having enough material, but it turned out we had an overabundance. Faye remembers the sessions because they marked the period while the band was obsessed with writing and recording. We were asking people if we could borrow their cottages to record in, he says. We were crazy about the process of writing, which is why there's all this material, more for the session than any other. We were in one of the sexiest cities to record in, a haunted mansion. We would have listening parties every night because we wanted to get better. We wanted Don Smith to be proud of us. We would work the tunes and try something new the next day. What's incredible is being able to get these songs out from that era, from this unique house, and has its own little voice to our band. Crack My Spine Like a Whip barrels down like a train shooting out of a tunnel, the kind of good old-fashioned rock song that compels crowd arenas to rise to their feet. The handwritten lyric sheet refers to it as Paul's song, which Langlois explained as how Downey would remember things. We were all contributing, he says, and gathering confidence because he had been playing live successfully for a good 6 years by then for a young band. It's amazing how often people will try and change you, whether it's record companies or the industry. Don Smith was someone we looked up to and saw that we were at our best when we played together. That instilled a whole level of confidence. Maybe that's why we weren't on the cover of Road Apples, because the first couple of albums is about trying to get known. We believed we had a great record and didn't feel that we had to be on the front anymore. Just as well as in another cut that would easily fit into Road Apples. While Reformed Baptist Blues is an unapologetic jam, its lead guitar writhing like a preacher at a mass. And then there's Montreal, recorded live at the Bell Centre on the 11th anniversary of the horrific École Polytechnique massacre of 1989. We wrote it just after the incident and played it a bunch of times, says Baker, but haven't located the tapes for this track. We got a great version from the live show. He has an interesting memory of the performance. That night it was suggested we could play Montreal, and I was in the dressing room. I ran through it to make sure I knew it, but there was a question about whether we would pull it off. Gord wasn't sure about the lyrics, so a road manager pulled them up on the internet. He had a quick once-over and said, "Okay, we got this." Then we went out and played like we had been playing it forever, he describes. It was one of the best songs that just came out of Ether. But it's like some of our better tunes, and every record that a song where you didn't feel you were writing it, like the song existed and you tapped into it somehow. It was one of those tunes you just fell back onto. We didn't have to relearn the song. There's nothing fancy or complicated about it. It was just getting the vibe right, which wasn't hard to do on that anniversary in the venue with a great crowd. So just again, my hand's cramping. I forgot how long this was. By Thunder and Jesus by. All right. Downey introduces Montreal as a song about the identification process, which Faye believes refers to the identification of a body. We were young when we first did it at Sinclair. By the time we played it at the Molson Center in 2000, we had all become parents, and it was even more profound. It's a tribute to the way Gord was able to put himself into that situation, capture an emotion. It had real resonance for us. It is special for Langlois too. I think it's a song that uses a sad, tragic image of a mother having to do that sort of thing and being told not to worry. He says, there's an attempt to be comforting. And I think it's one of the reasons it's a natural song for us. We always retain a soft spot for it. The incident was such a tragedy, and it's nice to be part of something that was meant to be sort of comfort. This is a bittersweet record, as Sinclair puts it. We are sadly never going to have the chance to put out new stuff. For us, in our minds, this is new. Langlois calls it nerve-wracking, but hopes fans old and new appreciate the sound of a band on fire. Baker is curious about the reaction, while Faye recalls how things used to be. When we made a record, he says, we'd be able to sit with it for a while after it was mixed and mastered. It was a golden time for 2 months or so, where we could play it for our friends, but had no idea how it would do. We were just happy because it was time It was a time capsule of the period in our lives. Though we had probably moved on and played other gigs, it's one of those things that when you're a band, you want as many people to hear your music as possible. You never really know, but it's nice to be able to get it out at the end of the day. It's part of our DNA. So they've also included in this a little soundbite of their first single. I guess it's coming out. Ouch. I put that on Records, Food, and Other Stuff on my Facebook page, the Records, Food, and Other Stuff Facebook page, and I will just post this on my regular Facebook page. But exciting, man! Canadian long weekend, and the Hip has new music. Who would have thunk it? All right, that's all. Wanted to get that out there. Have fun. Be safe.